I came in here, and this was the first time I really felt accepted. I went by a street name, Quack, actually, for a long time. Okay. And that's how I introduced myself here. I said, hi, my name's Logan, but I'd really rather you call me Quack. And they did, with no hesitation.
A year ago, going to church was the last thing on 27-year-old Logan Pickens' mind. But a trip to the laundromat one day changed all that. I'm Rhett Nelson, and today, the story of one man's struggle with addiction and how it helped him find God. That's next on Finding Faith. When 27-year-old Logan Pickens first walked into Trinity United Methodist Church in Idaho Falls a year ago, he was at rock bottom. He was nearly homeless and battling a drug addiction. One of his co-workers had introduced him to weed several years prior, which ultimately got him hooked on meth. He quit for a brief period of time, but later started using again after several failed relationships, including a divorce from his wife after just 6 months of marriage. He was now facing eviction from his apartment. And though he had a job as a chef at Cardamom Indian Restaurant in downtown, he was becoming dysfunctional because of his addiction. For him, life was spiraling out of control. Walking into a church was the last thing on his mind at that time. But a trip to the laundromat one day changed all that.
I used to live just by the YMCA, and so I would go down the street on Maple Street where there's a laundromat there, and I would do my laundry there, and a friend said, hey, come over to the church where you can do your laundry for free. And so I walked an extra 2 blocks or whatever and got my free laundry here.
The church has a day shelter that provides showers, food, and laundry services for those in need. Prior to living in Idaho Falls, Pickens had grown up in Missouri, where he learned to play the piano, the clarinet, and even sing. As a member of a marching band, music had been a big part of his life back home. It had now been more than 2 years since Pickens had sung or played a single note. But Pastor Ruth Marsh caught wind of Pickens' musical ability and offered him a job playing piano at worship services and other church events.
Part of it was, in fact, desperation because I needed a piano player. I had been praying about Logan and his demographic walking through the door for years. And it just happened that Logan was the prototype that walked through the door.
As a pastor, Marsh says God has often allowed her to see someone the way he does. And she noticed something in Logan she wanted to foster.
I grew up in a household with a mentally ill father who Logan reminds me incredibly of. Lots of drug addiction presents itself in the same way.
With absolutely no money to his name and nowhere to go, Pickens found temporary refuge living at the church before Marsh eventually took him in.
The day the stay-at-home order happened, Logan had brought a few things from their apartment over here to the church for safekeeping because Logan was about to be out on the street and was going to go and stay with a friend of his that was clear on the other side of town. And I realized, oh my gosh, that's going to be bad because if this stay-at-home order is so strict that Logan can't even come to the church to play the piano, I'm up the creek without a paddle.
Yeah.
So I said, I think I could probably figure out a way to get a little corner down in the basement in the choir room where you could at least sleep.
A year later, Pickens' life looks a whole lot different. His drug addiction is under control, and he now works full-time playing piano, operating sound and video equipment, and managing the church's social media pages. He's had many conversations with Pastor Marsh about God, and Marsh says it's helped Logan find his own faith.
He needed to be able to find out that God was bigger than Logan had learned as a young person.
Getting to this point has been a journey that began long before Logan ever set foot in Trinity United. It started when he was just a kid growing up in Missouri.
I grew up LDS in Missouri, and so I was one of those very active members then. I got to go to the dedication of the Nauvoo Temple, so that was something I was familiar with, and very big part of growing up.
Over time, Pickens started having issues with some of the doctrines of the LDS Church. Now, he didn't say specifically what beliefs he was struggling with, but many of his concerns revolved around events in the church's early history. He spoke with his parents about it, but he says they didn't take it very well.
I wasn't allowed to search it out as Joseph Smith did, and which is all I was trying to do.
And by the way, it's important to note members of the LDS Church believe Joseph Smith was called of God to help restore the church Jesus Christ established in the New Testament after centuries of apostasy. Well, Pickens started rebelling against his parents, who he says ultimately kicked him out of the house when he was 16. This prompted Logan to leave his faith behind.
As my family pushed me out, family being a big portion of the LDS religion, my deduction was if family isn't forever because they kicked me out, then they must not be knowledgeable about everything else.
His parents ended up moving to Idaho Falls in 2012, and Pickens moved back in with them after graduating high school.
We had a small moment of clarity where we got along for about 6 months, and I moved back in with them very shortly after I saw that there wasn't much hope for progress or change, so I moved out on my own. From that point on, I've been living on my own ever since.
Pickens started attending many Christian churches, but eventually he became unsatisfied with what they taught and ultimately abandoned his search and gave up on religion altogether. Now, over the last several years, Pickens says there's been a reconciliation between him and his parents. And though he still has no desire to return to the LDS Church, he's grateful to be on speaking terms with his family again. After a year of association with Trinity United Methodist Church, Pickens says he was blessed by the church's hospitality from the moment he walked in the door, and that's been highly influential in his addiction recovery and faith journey.
I came in here, and this was the first time I really felt accepted. I went by a street name, Quack, actually, for a long time. Okay. And that's how I introduced myself here. I said, hi, my name's Logan, but I'd really rather you call me Quack. And they did, with no hesitation.
Marsh says having Logan in her home has been a huge blessing in her life, and she's happy to claim him as a son, quote, that wasn't born to me. Watching Logan on his journey of recovery and faith has been a rewarding experience for her. Pickens' beliefs about God continue to evolve, but one of his favorite words to use when describing deity is love.
The God that I understand is just love, the capital L. It is loving yourself as much as you love everyone else. It's loving that stranger, and it's doing whatever you can while keeping your own self safe.
Pickens says this belief has given him a better understanding of who he is and who he wants to be. His goal now is to pursue a life of ministry, and he's currently taking lay servant classes in hopes of serving in a leadership role at Trinity United Methodist Church. Pickens' journey has been beneficial in other ways as well. Historically, members of the congregation have been older people in their 50s and 60s. One of the church's greatest challenges is reaching young people. Marsh says about 40 people in Logan's age bracket have walked through the doors at Trinity United since Logan came on board.
Last summer that we'd laugh about that he was like the Pied Piper. Because Logan was well known, so eccentric, and so well known in this neighborhood. In those days, he was traveling heavy in meth circles, and he was able to tell people, you can come to the church, and it will be safe, neutral ground.
Pickens says reaching out to people on their level and accepting them for who they are is something that deserves more focus in today's world.
And sometimes that means not focusing so much on, God, we really want you back to the church, things like that. Sometimes it means, hey, we hung out during, Scouts, and you like playing Dungeons and Dragons. Let's go play Dungeons and Dragons because that's what you like to do, and that's how I get to share this love with you. It's loving them on their level that allows you to better be more Christ-like.
For EastIdahoNews.com, I'm Rhett Nelson, and this is Finding Faith.